What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Favale back at you with Mort Jensen from the famed NBA podcast, Yahoo Sports, Sports Illustrated, and Forbes. And don't forget to subscribe to his OnlyFans, as we have to mention now at the top of every podcast with him. We are here to talk about last time, or a couple episodes ago, we did the search for the most dangerous Eastern Conference sleepers. We are now going to move to the Western Conference. It's only fair that they get a little shine for some teams who the idea here is we're looking at teams who are not considered contenders entering the season. And so while you might consider the Minnesota Timberwolves to be a fringe playoff team right now, because they're absolutely a fringe playoff team at the moment, they didn't loop into this discussion. But a team like the Suns, who everyone has been on the fence about since basically the middle of last year, if not beforehand, they would qualify. Mort, first and foremost, though, how the heck are you doing?
Doing well. You and I seem to have become permanent podcast brothers. What is this, 4 episodes in a row?
Four episodes in a week. We don't even normally put out 4 full episodes in a week, but look at us.
Oh, we're the little engine that can. Yeah.
The little engines that can. Without further ado, though, should we dive into this?
Absolutely.
First up, the Golden State Warriors, who probably profiled as a contender 15 games into the season, but they do not anymore. We did talk extensively about them on a Thursday podcast, or was it a Friday? Whatever it was. It was like a day or two ago, about the comments that Steph and Draymond had made. So go check out that discussion too for kind of a full overview of what's going on with the Warriors. Mort, how do we need to feel about this team right now, especially if, as Steph and Draymond say, they don't plan to mortgage the future to get better?
You know, this is one of those teams that because of the presence of Steph, you can never really rule them out. And at the same time, you just don't feel confident in them whatsoever. Like, they're not the juggernaut that used to be. They don't have the depth. The fact that Clay left isn't necessarily something that I hold against them, because Clay himself is also somewhat limited in the way he moves nowadays. So I don't think that's as big a loss as the media tried to make it out as. But I just don't have a good read on this team in terms of how they are as currently constructed. I mean, the Dennis Schroeder trade didn't work out. Jonathan Kuminga, who ended up last year as like the second best player on the team for a long stretch of time, has not lived up to that. He's not taking a step. It seems like they're kind of coming to that realization that he might not be the guy who they were hoping for. Brandon Podziemski took a step down this year, which I didn't anticipate. Like, I just have no idea what to make of this team. And yet there's that lingering goddamn feeling in the back of my head that as long as you have Stephen Curry, you can't be ruled out. And by the way, the fact that Grant isn't here to say, well, they have Lindy Waters, that's a shame. That's a shame.
They have Lindy Waters and Guy Santos, and that's how they right the ship. Is it not? Yeah. Am I wrong?
Totally fair. Totally
like, you just lean on them and you go from there.
Look, Steph, sit down. More Guy Santos. Yes. Absolutely.
He's the one who's really untouchable. Who do they trade first, Santos or Steph?
Definitely Steph. Anything else would be ridiculous. Yes.
So since they began the season 12-3, they are 9-17, the 24th highest net rating, 26th in points scored per possession at the offensive end, and they're 20th in points allowed at the defensive end, which is still supposed to be their calling card. They cannot. I still think the biggest problem, I think they can get to moments and long stretches where you really trust their defense. To me, their biggest problem is that the offense has no identity without Steph. And even late game situations with Steph, it can be rocky. They're in the 3rd percentile of offensive efficiency when Steph is off the court this season. That is low. Yeah. Now, you might think the idea of Dennis Schroeder was that he could help those minutes. We're talking about a sub 500 possession sample size, but when Schroeder plays without Steph, the Warriors offense is in the 1st percentile. A 98.9 offensive rating. Has not been a great fit so far. This team is kind of mentioned, even Steve Kerr kind of came right out and said it. The goal is to catch lightning in a bottle like they did in 2022, remain healthy enough. And I actually respect that they've admitted we're not going to run Steph aground trying to get the 6th or the 8th seed without making a trade. I guess just if this team doesn't make any changes, or even if they'll probably add a big, but like, who's the worst player, the worst type of player they could get that would make you feel better about them as a postseason threat? I'll use let's use Nikola Vucevic as an
I
example. I
was
think
just
that
about to say that name, actually. Yes.
that just feels like the one where
Yeah.
you give up either Dennis Schroeder and someone else, or you give up Gary Payton II, Kyle Anderson, and Kevon Looney, and then maybe you take back Torrey Craig and Vooch. However that works out. Does someone like that helps your rebounding, gives you size, they are undersized, and gives you, I mean, the way he's shooting this year, some spacing, and then maybe someone you could run
Vooch,
things through offensively. I would, by the way, I'd probably predict though, if he goes to Golden State, he'll start shooting fewer threes. I would guess in all likelihood, right? Because of the way they would want to use him. But is that like, does the player need to be better than that for you to view them as a real postseason threat? Do you see this team because of Steph, because of Draymond, because of what we know when Kuminga's healthy, what he can be, because of how Wiggins has played this year? Like, is there a chance that they're able to catch that lightning in a bottle at the end of the year if everybody's healthy?
Well, I mean, that depends on what constitutes lightning in a bottle. Is that a championship, or is it making?
Oh, I was thinking 12th in the West.
Right. No, but like, okay, we have to set some level of expectations here, because like the championship route, no, then Vooch is not going to be, the final piece of the puzzle, obviously. Could he be the difference in terms of whether they make the playoffs or not? Yes. Could he also be the difference maker in terms of whether they actually win in the first round? Possibly, if his shooting persists. He's taking less than 5 threes per game, so I actually think he can maintain that volume in Golden State. It's a good question. It's funny that we kind of think of the same player there, because it's a 2010 guy who passes pretty well, who fits the timeline next to Dre and Steph. He does make a lot of sense. He can play in a spacing offense. He can play in a slow offense. Although he's actually better in a spacing offense. That's part of this whole thing. That's been, the Billy Donovan just kind of dialed up the speed of the offense, the pace of the offense, and Vooch just kind of flourished under that. So maybe that's a big sign for the Warriors to get in on that action and just tell Steph and Draymond, run the ever living hell out of every opportunity that you got. Vooch will follow. He'll have a bigger and better chance of replicating that efficiency. I don't know, but I like him as a trade option for them. Is it going to turn them into a championship contender? No.
I do think it would probably make them, which is weird to say about Vucevic in terms of the playoffs, that it would just make them, it would give them more offensive optionality, because they are deep. They're just not deep with players who can play a ton of minutes, or they're not deep with, they're deep with flawed players. So they're useful players, but they're also flawed. And that's like a weird, complicated spot to be in. And it's just, look, Buddy Hield stopped shooting.
So are they deep? If you're deep with flawed players, are you then deep? Is this Schrodinger's flawed, like a Schrodinger stepped?
That's tough, because, but look at like their top 12 guys or something. Like, most of them would be in rotations around the NBA. So that's depth.
Yeah. That's fair. I can buy that. Yep.
But it's, you don't have, like, how many of them have two-way potential, or most of them just don't have like a on-ball.
Right.
Who aside from Steph has real on-ball gravity? I guess Kuminga and Schroeder's supposed to. So that's what's tough.
That's a nice way of phrasing it, supposed to. Yeah, because do you really think that Jonathan Kuminga has a lot of on-ball gravity?
I think when he really gets going downhill with the ball in his hands, like, that's when you see like defenses will react.
That's true.
Will he make the right pass or decision in those situations?
Right.
That's always been sort of a mystery. But, his play since their start in general ticked up. I think what's hurt them is, okay, Buddy Hield is no longer shooting 1,000,000,000% from three, and the defense has fallen off. I think Draymond slipped a little bit. I had him when we did our quarter season awards. I think I had him third in DPOY voting, and there's been a demonstrative downtick from him since then. They have dealt with some injuries. The fact that Brandon Podziemski has not taken a step forward this year. I mean, he's shooting almost 37% from three since their 12-3 start, but they're not like, I think they also viewed him as someone who might be able to steady the ship in Steph's absence, and that hasn't worked. They're getting good minutes from Guy Santos of late, but it's also kind of like, well, if we're at that point of the season, how good is this team really? I don't know how to feel like them, to be honest. I might align with you in the sense of, they have Steph, they have Draymond, and I really do think that they can get to a core lineup if they add a different type of big that would make you feel really good about that core lineup, to where, okay, how much can you lean on these 5, these 6 guys, and then mix and match them as part of your core unit. And I mean, even now, like, I know Trace Jackson Davis has his flaws, but like, a Wiggins, Green, Trace Jackson Davis, and then Steph, of course. Like there's kind of a nice baseline there. And by the way, you know what is also might just be their biggest flaw? Do you know what their most used lineup is on the season?
Hit me.
It's those four: Steph, Wiggins, Draymond, and Trace, with Lindy Waters the third. And that lineup has a plus 10.5 net rating, but like Lindy Waters the third has not played a ton of minutes for the Golden State Warriors overall. And so the fact that that's their most 5-man unit speaks to a ton of different things, availability, of course, but also just the way that the rotations can be managed. I don't know what the answer is for this team. I'd feel better about them if they added some functional size in the front court, but they are a significant player short of making noise. And I wasn't super confident that they were going to go after that player in the first place. I would now be floored, shocked if they did, based off those comments that we got from Steph and Dre.
Can I ask you, just to wrap this segment up, Moses Moody, do you think there's a type of solution internally that they just haven't given enough of a view?
Are you trying to imply that Moses Moody might be underutilized? Look, Mort, he's averaging over 15. He's averaging over 15 minutes per game. That's that might as well be 48 based off like how they use him. I don't know if I don't think he's a solution just because he might, if you're looking to shrink the rotation and find more consistency, yes, I think that he could be a solution. But in terms of what I think they need most, which is just kind of another offensive engine, no, he's not going to be the solution there.
No. I'm basically talking just about finding quality on this roster that you can sort of rely on, because I still, like, we're over 200 games into his career, and I don't think I really have a strong grasp of, who the hell he actually is as a player. And I think that's in large part because he's not been given a chance. But at the same time, I also have a hard time just kind of keep pointing the finger at Golden State for 4 years and going, well, I mean, after 4 years, you probably should have an idea of where the guy is. But they also extended him in the same breath. So, like, I'm very weirded out by that situation.
I mean, here's my thing. He's not shooting the ball well over this like stretch since they were 12-3 from 2. Still close to, he's like 36.5% from 3 on not necessarily a ton of volume, but doesn't play a ton of minutes. I very rarely come away from his minutes, and I've said this before, thinking that he doesn't belong like on an NBA court.
Right.
And I think given his minutes, I know you're deep. Well, you're deep, like, but are you deep with players where it's worth marginalizing Moody's development, especially if you remain steadfastly against mortgaging your future? So, yeah, I would argue, I don't think there are any answers internally for this roster, but there's a chance. I don't think you could say this about every team, that maybe a modest move does give them sort of just this nudge in the right direction to where, oh, you don't want to meet them in a playoff series. Our next team, the Los Angeles Clippers. Hellfire defense. Their offense is a burden. Kawhi has played basketball, and the spacing, I don't know how much of the like Kawhi minutes you've seen this season. And to be clear, there has still been very few of them. He has played in how many games? 4. The spacing is just so much different when he's on the court already. That's where I know they could trade a first-round pick. They have a swap. They have Terrence Mann's salary. They have PJ Tucker's salary. They could do something. I wouldn't be shocked, but I just don't know what they're going to do. The idea of this team, though, like if Kawhi is just healthy-ish for the playoffs and can give you even 25 minutes, like how do you view the Clippers?
Kawhi is Kawhi. I don't think, for some reason, it doesn't matter what kind of injury he goes through. It seems like he's always bouncing up on the other side of it, and it's like still the same caliber of player. If that holds true yet again, yeah, their ceiling goes up, but at the same time, I sort of like ask the same question as I did with the Warriors. Like, what is their top tier ceiling here? Are we talking about the second round of the playoffs at best, at most? Like, I don't think we can argue with a straight face. It should go beyond that.
I probably agree with you, because you're going to get to a point in the playoffs where you need that upper echelon type of offense, and they don't have it. Like honestly, the fact that they're giving how much time Kawhi has missed, or basically missing the entire season, the fact that they're 22nd in half court offense is almost impressive when you look at their personnel has been available. But I think their defense just operates on this level to where if you threw minutes, like depending on how much you worry about playing time, like they probably have 2 or 3 all defense candidates on this roster. You've gotten for the most part, he's not as thermonuclear as he was to start the year, but you've gotten a really big jump from Norman Powell. James Harden, we've seen his 3-point efficiency tick up like since basically before Thanksgiving. You're getting good minutes from Amir Coffey.
Yep.
The fact that their defense is like, it is actual hellfire when you watch them. It is exhaustive. They can get at you from every level. They can do all sorts of different things. It scales to all different types of looks with their lineups. If they're going to just be a top 5 defense, like if you have Kawhi Leonard on the floor, let's not even let's just say Kawhi Leonard looks like what he's looked like, but he's on the floor in the playoffs.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would rule out winning 2 playoff series in the West right now, because who is aside from Oklahoma City, who is just the team that's been head and shoulders above? I guess the Mavs haven't necessarily been healthy enough to establish themselves there, but it's not as good as the Grizzlies and Rockets been. It's not them. It's not the Nuggets.
I think for me, the question is Harden, right? So his efficiency, while I agree with you, it's been ticking up lately. There's no agreement in place. Like the stats just kind of lay that out. On the season, he's been not where he needs to be. The turnovers have remained a problem. Like I do think in a playoff context, that is a hard combination. Like if you have a guy who's a high turnover, low efficiency type of scorer, you're working at a disadvantage at that point in some regards. And that's probably where I think it falls short a little bit. And then there's also just a part of me that wonders, Norman Powell, he's knocking on the door of like 50, 45, 85, which is ridiculous. But there's also part of me that's like, going into a playoff series, where teams really have a lot of time to prepare, make adjustments. Are you telling me they can't find a solution to a 6'3" off guard who can't really do a whole lot else but just score? I don't know if I trust that component. And I say this as a huge Norman Powell fan, by the way.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that's fair, and he's just, I still think just because of like when he's gonna play in tandem with Harden, like there's gonna be defenses will be tilted enough for him to kind of like that, like what he's doing should sustain to some degree. But I do recognize that point. It's where it comes back to, it seems like they need a second creator more than anything. Right. And
Kawhi would probably be it, though. That's a fair point from your point. I mean, look, Kawhi can't create. And if he's healthy, he's going to be the linchpin. And that means that Norman Powell will tick down on the offensive totem pole, which might make him more offensive or more offensive relevant. And for Harden, maybe that means an uptick in efficiency. Like, I guess if you squint, you can make a real argument for them winning 2 playoff series. I think
that's the Kawhi of it all. Yeah, that's not, as of right now, if they don't do anything and Kawhi might not be available, they're not, I don't even think they win a series, to be honest. Like, you're going to need more offense out of it. And you at least need to find some way to, I think, alleviate the burden on James Harden, because he's still, to me, a borderline transcendent passer. And like we said, his efficiency is ticked up. But like the fact that his burden, when you're just looking at true usage, which incorporates his scoring and his playmaking, like that is exponentially higher than it was last year. And I understand that Paul George is gone and that Kawhi hasn't been healthy, but that's also kind of the point.
Yep.
So there, as of right now, if they don't make any changes, I would probably agree with you that maybe they could like steal a series there. But I also can't just write off the fact that we're halfway through the season. They're in an actual Western Conference playoff spot. And with like nightmare availability from Kawhi, they're basically 500 against opponents with winning records this year. And I can't write that off totally. However, wrap up here with a quick question. I don't think that unless you have some information on Kawhi that we don't, I don't think they're good enough to go out on the trade market and say like, hey, we can trade a pick and a swap off in the, like, I can't, if you can do something with the man Tucker salaries and it's bring back somebody, I don't know who that somebody is, but just like, does man have a ton of standalone value to where you can use him and PJ Tucker to get who? I don't know what the answer is. Yeah. Okay. Maybe you look at that, but I don't think they're good enough to approach the trade deadline with the urgency that their future, that their current draft pick obligations suggest.
I would agree with that.
Our next team is also in LA. which I think some people might argue they're not a fringe playoff team because of how good they are relative to the standings, is the Lakers, Mort. How do you feel about them?
I think they're old, and I think it's a team though that's playoff tested, obviously before because they won the title in 2020. LeBron is LeBron, even though he's 40. Davis is this year what a top 3, top 4 NBA player probably. I mean, just when he's on, I like the cohesiveness of those two. I still think they have so many one-way players. I get that they got Dorian Finney-Smith in there to sort of even things out. I hated or wow, I'm tired. By the way, it's past midnight. I love the trade for them to get a two-way guy in there, especially a switchable forward who can hit the three, defend multiple positions. That was nice. I do think they need to make a follow-up trade before the trade deadline of giving up someone who's like only offensively or defensively inclined and then get a two-way guy in there. Is that Rui Hachimura who has to be moved for someone who might be a little worse offensively, but who can participate on both sides of the floor? Or do we have to look at the Jerry Vanderbilt contract and say, look, this guy is not going to be able to score at any level if he's healthy? Or should we look at someone who can actually hit a three-point shot in that role instead? I think that those are the type of deals that they need to go in and check.
What is it again? What is their biggest need? Because it seems, I mean, Dorian Finney-Smith might help here long term,
Mhm.
but if they're going to continue to switch so readily on the defensive end, they don't really have the personnel still to do
Right.
that. And we've seen just points where they've been burned by that. But you could also make the case that, well, do you want a reserve big? Do you want a starting big next to Davis? And then what does that do to like however you want to switch? Does that make you better equipped, less equipped? I also think that you look at this and say, okay, well, you gave away D'Angelo Russell. And while you have LeBron James and you have Austin Reeves, like there's another need for just a from scratch shot creator here as well. And I just like what need, and you could also say, okay, like they also could maybe need someone who's a caps lock shooter, not just someone who can hit threes, but can kind of fly around, get them
Yep.
up at higher volume because they're once again in the bottom 5 of 3-point attempt rate. And they're actually hitting their threes at a lower clip this year compared to last season by 2.3 percentage points less. There are a lot of different ways you could go when balancing the most glaring need with the feasibility of filling it. What do you think should be their primary focus ahead of the deadline?
Yeah, a guard who can fix some of the issues you just outlined there wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. A guy like Kobe White in a perfect world, I think would fit that system pretty well because he can play on ball, off ball. Defensively, he's grown in recent years. He's a bit more of a playmaker than he was than when he was like a real youngster. He would come in and provide them with a sort of set baseline from the guard spot. The thing is, can you get him? I don't know whether he's available or what the price would be. I think the Bulls should pivot off of him. I think he would fit that mindset. You could even replace him with a different Chicago guard in Ayo Dosunmu. He kind of fits the same mold, just lesser
Mhm.
volume. Better defender, though. I think he would be a really good fit, even though he won't have the same type of ceiling there. But a guard is what I'm looking for too, especially someone who can play both sides of the court.
I don't know what to make of them though, because you look at the
No,
standings and they're right there. They're sixth in the West, which is 4 games under 500 is nothing to sneeze at. They are 10-14 though against opponents 500 or better. And I know StatHead Basketball Reference has this simple rating system that takes into account your margin of victory with the strength of schedule. Do you know where they rank in the Western Conference in strength of schedule adjusted, basically net rating?
no, tell me.
They rank 11th. That's not good.
That's not great. No, that's
And
not
I
great.
know they've had some just sort of wild swing games, but when you're not necessarily beating all these really good opponents consistently, is this something you hope just kind of evens out as you move forward? I honestly don't know. I think I'm with you that look, I think I'd probably target just someone. You're probably not going to find another two-way player who can operate on the ball for what they can offer.
Right.
Because who even is, first of all, who is that? And do the Lakers have the assets to go get them? If you wanted to, like, maybe you could get involved in the Jimmy Butler sweepstakes, but now you're getting older. You're talking about mega money there, and you're not doing anything for your floor spacing or shooting in that regard. Uh, I don't have the answer. And so I'm wondering, like, do they just need to lean all the way into offense then at this point. You mentioned Kobe White would be a good one. This is a team that doesn't seem like it wants to give up a ton of first round picks. Do you try and step ladder your way to Zach LaVine?
I mean, look, if you want to lean in to offense, you wouldn't have made the Russell for Dorian Finney-Smith deal in the first place. So I don't think that is a viable option for them necessarily. I mean, it should have been. It should have been because then you would leaned into Dalton Connect. That's his name. And then yes, Zach LaVine would have made a perfectly fine acquisition. But I do think they want to lean into something that's a little bit more defensively oriented, which again, we can sit here and debate until we're blue in the face whether that's the right call or not. But it would just seem odd to me that they move out an offensive-minded player for someone who's more defensively inclined, only to say, "Oh, we're leaning into offense." I don't
they've
see
been
the logic.
the name they've been most aggressively linked to is Jonas Valanciunas. That's not a defensive move outside of rebounding.
That is not, but I also don't expect him to play more than 20 minutes at most.
I mean, if you can get him for the Gabe Vincent deal in a second, you should probably just do that. But then, by the way, I mean, Valanciunas is more of a hub than Gabe Vincent would ever be, but you are removing another, in theory, ball handler from your ranks. You're
just clearing the way for Bronny James, man.
They're a tough team to figure out. I don't think they're as non-threatening as people have painted them out to be, but their indicators are not super positive. They are a plus 6.1 though per 100 with Dorian Finney-Smith on the court so far. So, and by the way, guess they've done that all offense. They have like a 120, what was the last time? 127 net offensive rating with him on the court. I believe that's high. But he's not someone who's like alone, I think, going to stabilize the defense. He's kind of just a body. Like you said, they need more two-way players on this team. They have a 124 offensive rating with Dorian Finney-Smith on the court. Ironically, well, that wouldn't be their best line, but like, there's like a good baseline there between Reeves, Finney-Smith, LeBron, and AD. And it's kind of like, who's the ideal fifth player to plug in there that would make the most sense for this team? I don't think it's Rui. Spoiler alert for anybody listening or watching.
Can I ask you, how much stock do you put into this? Like, some of their losses have just been so horrid. Like, they've had a lot of bad losses where they've just been, I mean, it's blowouts. And most of their wins have been like, oh, we just got over the hump. Like, is that something you put any stock into?
Honestly, their clutch time performance has been, they're not getting lucky. And so it makes me think like, okay, maybe you should place stock in it, but I think I'd place more stock in it with, are those wins coming against teams that they're going to need to beat in a playoff series?
Right.
And it's when you start to dig into the overarching schedule for them, the answer is no. Okay. So like, I think that's where I struggle with, but I think, let's just say they don't make a move or they acquire a big. Do you view them as a team that can maintain top 6 status in the West, a team that can win a playoff series, win 2 playoff series? Just like, where are you kind of at with them?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I do think they can win a playoff series. I also think they can win 2, again, heavily emphasis on depending on matchup, right? Like who they're going up against. The fact that we're seeing a Western Conference that's very, very potent, yes, but at the same time, we're seeing Denver, lose a step. Houston, who's second in the conference, is still a very young team. You can exploit young teams in the playoffs, especially if you're a veteran team who knows all the tricks of the trade. Memphis, wow. I mean, look, their season, I'm so impressed with their season. I think it's the team that missed the most games due to injury, and they're third in the West. That's impressive as hell. But that also means because of that injury bug, like, are they going to be healthy coming into the playoffs? I have no idea. If they're not, the Lakers could probably take them. The Clippers, I don't necessarily have a lot of faith in. The Dallas Mavericks is Luka going to be, fully available? Is he going to be 100%? We don't know the answer to that. I don't trust Minnesota. I don't trust Sacramento. So the only team in the West, which is kind of what my point is going to be boiled down to, is the one team that I trust is OKC. So if they avoid them on their path, is there a way they could make it to, well, it depends on their seeding, of course, but to the West Finals, I suppose. But they would have to go really high for that to happen. So, yeah.
That'll be an interesting question to ask at the end of this, which team you're going to end up trusting the most from this group of 6. We're on to the Phoenix Suns, another team we discussed in detail following the trade for Nick Richards. So I would encourage anyone to go check out that episode. Where in the hell are you at with them, though?
Look, whenever a team has Kevin Durant, I have this. I said this in the last episode as well. I think I even said in this episode, when you have Steph Curry, there's always this belief in something. I have the same opinion of Kevin Durant, because Kevin Durant is a ridiculously talented basketball player who is so unstoppable of an offensive force that it's difficult to comprehend. Yet this season, it just hasn't worked out. And yeah, there have been injuries, there have been lineup shuffles, there have been big man issues on all this. But if the Nick Richards acquisition does work out for him, if that suddenly aligns stuff and it means a less emphasis on KD, on Booker, on Beal, on having to do big man stuff, and they can focus on what they do best, then hell yes, I'm going to lean into the Suns, but they have to show it before I'm like doing it. I'm not going to sit here and predict that, oh, this trade, and we haven't even seen Nick Richards play yet, this is going to fall into line. Like, I have to see it first, but there is a world wherein I could trust him. KD, man, that's the name for me. If he keeps playing at the level that he does, and if they do sneak into the playoffs, then I'm just not going to put a cap on them, because the talent level is ridiculous.
It's just wild to kind of think that
Yeah.
they're guaranteed to get into the playoffs as of right now.
Yeah. No,
They're
totally.
outside the play-in as we're recording this, and I mean, you could say you don't expect that to hold, but the teams in front of them, Golden State, Sacramento, Minnesota, Dallas, Lakers, like, what is the team that they're going to catch? But they are within close proximity to, basically, with the exception of OKC and Houston, everybody else, like, within reasonable distance. So I guess you could say that they have that going for
But
them.
also, we're still, some time away from a trade deadline. I mean, there could still be follow up trades. I mean, this episode, and the East one we did as well, we're taking a look as currently constructed, but we also have to recognize that some of these rosters could look a little bit different come February 6th.
I just don't know what the move is. I mean, Jimmy Butler would make me feel a lot better, because this team, so they start, Phoenix was 12-8. And since then, and they've dealt with some like availability issues. Kevin Durant missed some time. They are still 11th in points scored per possession. They're 25th in points allowed per possession. And I just don't know. Like, Nick Richards is going to help your base defense some, I would imagine. But I just, the guys, they're so reliant on Osegadaro and Ryan Dunn, which is kudos to those guys, but it's also a little bit, or to a lot of it, troublesome when you're kind of looking at it through the context of a playoff series. Royce O'Neal healthy now, but they lean on him too much. It feels like they need another, I don't want to say premier, but like someone who's going to really help contain the ball on the perimeter, maybe be moved around a bit, that doesn't have this, like, or have as many glaring offensive limitations. And so, like, Royce O'Neal doesn't have a ton of offensive limitations, I guess, unless you're asking him to handle the ball. But like, there's a limit to what he's going to be able to do for you on defense. And I just don't know how they go. Like, the guy that they need, to me, even if you're independent of making it a star, I don't know how you get him. Like, you dangle that 2031 pick with all different sorts of matching salary that you have. I don't know what the name is for, like, aside from Jimmy Butler, who's the name for them?
Yeah. It has to be a connector, like a real connector. I have an off-ball or an oddball idea, but again, he's missed most of the season, so I don't know if he has time to ramp up. Bruce Brown in this system, I wouldn't hate. I think there's something there.
They can't get him.
They
just don't have that. They need a singular contract to get him with, because he's at over 20 million, and they just don't have that if you're not going to trade Beal.
You're right. I was thinking Grayson Allen. Allen's making less. You're right. Bruce is at what, 23? Right. They can't.
Yeah.
Okay. Something else that I've been thinking about, by the way, if they were to get Jimmy, and I know positions don't really matter as much in today's NBA, I would start him at the 1 and take Tyus Jones out of the starting lineup. I would have Tyus Jones just run that second unit like the terrific on-ball creator and low turnover guy that he is. I would want some stability.
So is this more about you trust Devin Booker off the ball more than Jimmy Butler, or you trust Jimmy Butler more on the ball, like as a facilitator, than Devin Booker? Both.
So I trust Devin as a playmaker. Like, this isn't me not trusting Devin Booker. this is me believing that Jimmy Butler has historically proven to be a low turnover type of guy who has a court vision that I don't think he gets the proper amount of respect for. And I also like the idea of playing Book more off ball, more in terms of like as a floor spacer. I don't think Devin Booker, it sounds ridiculous when he's taking 8 threes per game this year, but I don't think he's taking enough. I don't think he's taking enough. And I know he's only hitting them 34%, but like that's Devin Booker. He can find his, he can find efficiency whenever. He's that good of a player. I'm not worried. I would like to see him getting more freed up as a scorer. I don't think him getting 25 points per game, I think that's like in the low end of what he can achieve.
Mm.
Jimmy, as we're well aware, if he buys into this whole thing, and given that he wants Phoenix, I imagine he would, he doesn't care about shot amounts or shot attempts. Like that is the one thing about him that I think is a major, major upside offensively speaking. He is fully satisfied getting 8 shots, 10 shots, and if a game necessitates that he takes 15, sure, fine, whatever. But if he can come in and just say, "Look, I don't have this shot hungriness of a Bradley Beal. I have no problem just running the show as your lead guard, defend the point of attack, switch over to bigger guards, bigger wings, and do whatever. Like be this Swiss Army knife." That I think has some juice, especially if you put Tyus on the bench and you also ask Tyus not just to facilitate off the bench, but
Mhm.
also to score more because I think he's a much better scorer than he's ever been made, up to as. And he's starting alongside Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and for the most part this year, Bradley Beal. Like there's a pretty good reason he's not been able to demonstrate, his scoring prowess. It's a matter of just aligning things.
Yeah, I just I don't want to say I'm out on this team. I'm curious to see their new starting five, which I assume you'll sub in Nick Richards for Mason Plumlee, but their new starting five has been like a plus 25 per 100, but they've gotten really lucky on opponent 3-point shooting,
Yep.
23%, sub 55% shooting at the rim. So I'm just curious to see how that sustains long term. And I've been trying to find like a non-star for them that not going to do what Jimmy Butler does offensively necessarily in terms of handling the ball, but just like, can you move him around like aggressively on defense? He's going to give you more on offense than a Ryan Dunn. And I think part of like the issue is, I don't even know, like, are there Western Conference teams that would have the foresight to say, okay, like if they're giving us their 2031 pick, like we'll help Phoenix out this year? Because like a lot of these, like how many teams are going to talk themselves into like, well, we could be better than Phoenix. We don't want to help them out. So they're in such a tough spot, obviously, because of the limited assets. I don't have a great feel for what
Nope.
this team is if they don't make any further moves. I would say that I would cap them out at one playoff series win. I know like you have Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, and those guys give you, I guess, in theory, a chance against everybody, but I just haven't seen enough defensively, collectively
Right.
from this group. And even like the offense can be meh. Like they were shooting a lot more threes to start the year, and then that kind of was yanked back down. There's just all sorts of noise here, and a lot of it's uncomfortable.
Yep. I agree.
Who are we going to talk about next, Mort? Your team. Oh no, not yet. The Sacramento Kings. They've
Yeah,
been they've been better since getting rid
they
of Mike
have.
Brown.
They have. I don't know where I am here because I thought they did Mike Brown a little dirty. I thought it was more of a roster construction issue than it was a coaching issue. And now the Kings are kind of like just pointing at me and going, "Really, Mort? Really? That's what you thought? Look at how we're doing right now." Um, if this was a coaching change that was needed, cool. that's that's awesome. I might be inclined to think this is just like a coach switch high. So we'll see how they're looking in a couple of weeks. Um, but this team still is intriguing to me on many levels. Do I think they come with a pretty set ceiling because of DeMar and his ability to just really eat up so much clock, setting himself up in the half court situations? Yes, I don't think that is necessarily the way they should function. It's going to be interesting to see how they lean into the second part of this season. Like the one thing for me, Dan, the one thing that I want to focus on if I'm them going into the second half of the year is finding a way to get Keegan Murray going. Like this has been an absolutely horrendous offensive first half of the year for him. Like completely unacceptable given the potential, the scoring prowess, like who he is as a basketball player. If they find some type of way to get him more involved, to get him more efficient, to get him into a higher volume setting, and you can sort of play through him in a bit more, and you can scale back on the DeMar stuff, then I think we have a team that could be proper explosive and can actually win a couple playoff series,
Well, he is
depending on
shooting over.
matchup.
He's been dealing with ankle stuff, but he is shooting
Yes.
over 40% from three since the coaching change. And I
Right.
think Doug Christie, we've talked about this, you and I, and Grant and I as well, like putting not even just, excuse me, putting Keon Ellis into the starting lineup, but just playing Keon Ellis more has been a cheat code that was, I think, always staring Mike Brown in the face. That Fox, Ellis, DeRozan, Murray, Sabonis lineup is a plus 21.5 for the season with an offensive rating more of 134.4. So that's like the fact that they might just have this elite core unit for them. I was pretty, I don't know that I don't think any Kings fans actively listened to me or I convinced them that this team was better, but I looked at their vitals. I watched a lot of their games that they choked away, and I just saw that there was a better team there. I
Yep.
don't know how good that could be, but I really think the bigger thing for them is I've mentioned before, I would absolutely give up my like first round pick in 2027 conditionally to get Jimmy Butler in here. And you trade DeMar DeRozan as part of that trade.
Yeah, I
King
was about
fans
to
don't want to
say.
do it.
Right.
That's fine. So I'm not going there, but I view this as like I just want them to stretch out their rotation a little
Yep.
bit further because I really do think there's something here. And of the teams that we've talked about so far, we have another team. Do we have two teams to go? One or two teams to go?
At
I
least
actually
one.
think that this is the team that whether we're looking at it through they don't make any changes or they make non-star trades because like
Right.
if someone trades for Jimmy Butler, someone trades for then we have to relitigate that. I think they, to me, clearly have the highest ceiling of all the teams that we have talked about so far.
Yes. So Jimmy instead of DeMar, I'm there. That's a team that I would trust that. And like I was on the last podcast as well where I was like very, very reluctant to include a first for Jimmy Butler because of the contractual situation, because of the age and all that. Look, you can laugh all you want. I'm still there. I'm Mr. Safety Man. But for the Kings right now, that might actually be the exact type of dude who they need. Because DeMar, as much as we all love him and how awesome he actually is, he's too shot hungry. He just is. He takes up too many possessions. And I don't even think he leans into his passing a whole lot more. And remember when he was in San Antonio, who's basically like their pseudo point guard. The guy has excellent court vision, but since his Bulls tenure, it's all about no, I got to get mine. I got to get the shots up. I don't have a problem with that because usually he's pretty efficient. He's been pretty efficient as well this year, considering the shots that he's taken. But you need that guy, and I outlined Jimmy previously in terms of like he doesn't demand X amount of shots. He'll play within the flow of the offense, so he's not gonna dribble the ball into the ground 16 times before taking a shot. He's going to make quick decisions. He's going to turn his attention to defense. He's going to lean into his passing. He's going to be way more opportunistic. And I think that's what they need. So if you could replace DeMar with Jimmy Butler in this constellation, even if it's just for a half-year rental, yeah, I'm probably giving up a first, but I'm protecting the ever-living hell out of it.
While I would do that deal, again, I just don't know if I'm like, I guess you could look at it as so what you gave up for DeMar, then combined with what you're tacking on top of him, like that's what you gave up to get Jimmy Butler. But I also think like if they upgrade like sort of the reserve front courts, where the way I mean Chris Boucher he's having a minute at the moment. Even by I love Chris Boucher, but he's playing out of his mind over the past 4 or 5 games.
Right.
That like can you use Trey Lyles to get him? I think that would be an upgrade there.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
Something else you could look at, there have to be a little bit more money involved, but I know this is one of your favorites. I mean, getting both of them would be tough, but like you have Kevin Huerter, you have Trey Lyles, getting Bruce Brown and Chris Boucher. So there needs to be like probably more money going out there given Sacramento's tax situation. I'm just eyeballing this. I've been thinking about Chris Boucher for them for a while. I don't know, like,
oh, you pivoted off Isaiah Stewart because we had a podcast about 2 months ago, a month and a half ago, where you were really in on Isaiah Stewart for the Kings, which I really liked.
I like that idea. I just don't know. It's Kevin Huerter and what? Like, can you attach seconds to that? And like, I don't know why Detroit is going to bite there. I do believe. I know there's. We have a really one of a diehard Pistons fans in our Discord that just has reiterated that Isaiah Stewart. He's not shooting threes this year, Even
Right.
when he was shooting them, he wasn't like taking them at like a
Yep.
super fast clip and is hesitant to take them. I still believe that he can provide you with some stretch
Yes.
in the
Yes.
front court position. Like that's just something I believe. Yeah, I just don't know. I'm not giving up my 2027 first round pick for him because there's no bad money on it.
Right.
Like the worst, I think some people would argue the worst contract is actually Sabonis's, but outside from that, it's like, okay, it's Kevin Herter's. What does that do for you? Uh, but I've also thought about like, would you roll the dice? He can't give you a ton of minutes, but this is a team that could probably use Kevin Herter. Is it too much of a consolidation to go Kevin Herter and Trey Lyles for Jonathan Isaac? His contract, by the way, just
Right.
plummets.
Yeah, it
this
does.
year
It
from
does.
20.
That's why I find it intriguing, because if it didn't, I would say hell no. So you'd have to rely on Jonathan Isaac to also hit the three ball at a consistent rate, though. You would
Do
have
you?
to. Yeah.
I mean, like Trey Lyles has not been hitting it at a consistent rate
I
this year.
know that's why
He
you
does
also
take
needed.
them to his defense, and he's been shooting like 35% since Doug Christie came around. But still,
Look, I know I think you do, because you have to get back to like that very bombastic, flamboyant offense that you led the league with a couple of years ago. I think that's what you need to get back to. So yes, you absolutely need someone in there who can space the floor. Can I ask you something else though? If Kevin Herter is still on the Kings roster after the trade deadline, is that a failure on their part?
no, just because. So I think at this point, if you can't do something like one of the deals we outlined without including a first round pick,
Right.
then there's no point in trade. You waited too long to trade him. That's a previous failure. You shouldn't throw good money
Right.
after bad at this point. And there's also like, so if you have to attach too many stuff to get a marginal or even a modest upgrade elsewhere, I'd rather try to hold out hope that it just comes together for him, because like he can still be in theory, be a super dangerous shooter. So I wouldn't do something. I'd be more inclined to be like, if I can't move Kevin Herter, maybe this is real sicko shit, and I'm sure Washington Wizards fans won't like it. How do we get Justin Champagnie in Sacramento? Might be like a perfect fit for everything they really do.
I promise you, if the Wizards front office are smart at all, they are not giving him up for anything less than a solid first round draft pick. And I know that I know that the sample size is small. He is good, as is his twin brother. The Champagnie's bros are real dudes in this league, and it's amazing to me that no one seems to pick up on that fact. Everyone's like, when they're trying to make Spurs trades, for example, no one's really like penciling in Champagnie in the rotation. Like, oh, he's been starting a lot for him this year. He's really good. Justin Champagnie also is coming to life now. Again, hitting the three ball, even a better rebounder than his brother. I love those two guys.
I forgot Justin was still on a two-way. They haven't converted. Like, he needs to be converted.
They haven't converted him yet? Are you kidding me?
Let me double check that on Spot Rack. I like to call it Spot Track, but it's apparently Spot Rack. Yeah, no, Justin Champagnie is on a two-way still. The 23-year-old.
Spot Track. Keith's told me Spot Track.
Spot Track. Someone else told me Spot Rack. I call it Spot Track, so it's Spot Track.
Yeah, it's Spot Track. No, I will say, like, what did you call it? Like Spot Track or Spot Track?
I'm inclined to say Spot Track is what I want to say.
Spot Track. Okay. Yeah.
Maybe that's because I like to say Coach Spo. But so you wouldn't, like, if we're being real, I guess, yeah, if you're the Wizard, I mean, they don't have a ton of like extra. If you were getting multiple seconds,
right?
I don't know. I mean, like, there could be some, like, maybe if you're taking on Kyle Kuzma from them and sending out Kevin Herter and Lyles, you can get back Justin Champagnie. If you're including enough, that would be a trade I'd be interested. It doesn't really fix your backup big. Right. Isaac would do that, or Boucher would do that. They'll probably be like a Jonas Valanciunas team just because you could get him using Lyles, but then you're really leaning into the offense there. But again, he's probably an upgrade overall. I still maintain this, but like, if you got to give up, it's just tough to work. It's not super tough, but it's a little tough to work. They would be another RW3 team where it's like, okay, we know Sabonis is going to play 30 right. in the playoffs, forget about it. But like during the regular season, he's going to play that's 35, 36 of your center minutes done. That's almost the perfect landing spot for Robert Williams III, because you don't need him to play more than 10 or 15 minutes a night.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think they're the team I'm highest on, even if they do nothing of who we've discussed. There are other teams, I should say team, to talk about. They're your team, Mort. The San Antonio Spurs. I have I'm coming into this. I haven't watched a single Spurs basketball game. I don't even know who this Victor Wembanyama person,
Yeah.
extraterrestrial being is. Educate me on how high this team ceiling is.
I mean, to do that, I would first have to tell you about Wemby, and you wouldn't believe me. You would think I'd be lying. I mean, for someone who's of the uninitiated, how can you even describe Wemby with a straight face? You can't. That's just the real answer. Here's the thing: he's 21 years old, and there's a reason the Spurs are already thinking about accelerating the rebuild.
Oh, I'm sorry. They are. I'm
Yeah,
not.
look,
I'm not even being an asshole here.
like the
They,
De'Aaron Fox thing, like the report of them being interested in
what?
De'Aaron Fox. I mean,
Well, when the reporting is they would be interested in trading him for him over the offseason, it's kind of like, okay.
well, I mean, look, that's still when you think about the fact that there is a 6-year difference in terms of that I still consider that like showing your hand a little bit. I would probably like I love De'Aaron Fox, and I know a lot of people would love that fit. I am like I said in the I think it was the previous podcast we did. I would love for Vic to actually become one of the older members of a core, so he doesn't go through the Giannis stuff now. Where if he has the secondary star next to him, then when that guy ages out, oh, now we can't figure out what to do because we're capped the hell out and we have no idea what to move here. I think it's so crucial that the Spurs figure this one out. If that means going through just going through the rest of this year without a trade, all right, fair enough, and then we just remove them from the equation in terms of like could they be a real threat. But if they go all in, and not all in, but if they go in on a guy this trade deadline who's like still in his mid-20s and who's an all-star caliber talent, it's also difficult to argue against it because of how good Victor Wembanyama is already. So do I trust them to make a long, a strong push inside the playoffs, like to the second round or to the conference finals? No, at least not right now. They're, I think, 19-20, so barely a 500 team, or not even a 500 team.
They are
It really
below
depends.
the Suns in the standings, which is just inexcusable.
But like they have so much going for them. It doesn't really matter. Like I still think they should use the contract of Zach Collins. They also have some nice trade assets in terms of Keldon Johnson because like Keldon is a flawed player, but at the salary he's earning and that's declining in value. I think he's earning 19 this year, then it drops to 17.5 million next year and the year after. That means that's
He's
very
look,
tradable.
this time last year, I think some people would have said this was wild. He has more trade value right now than Kyle Kuzma, I would think.
Oh, that's interesting. I never put them up to comparison. I think that I could see that. I could see a case for that for sure. So they have movable assets. They have a lot of draft picks. I mean, I've been on this show and on my own show and on Danish shows and on Forbes and Yahoo talking about the trade that I love for him. And
OnlyFans, don't forget on there too.
OnlyFans as well. I'm reiterating it. Like, look, Ayodosumo Kobe White to the Spurs for Malachi Branham, Zach Collins, the Bulls 2025 pick back, and Atlanta's unprotected 2027 pick. If you need to add draft picks to sort of align value, fine. I don't think you would need a ton, but I think that is a perfectly reasonable ballpark for both sides to at least start out. I don't think either team, hangs up the phone on that offer. I think that's a perfectly reasonable conversation to start out as. And those are the type of deals I think wouldn't be bad for the Spurs, where they get guys in who are underpaid, a little bit undervalued, who are still young, who can help this team win now and in the future, and then they can make a call later on. Those are the deals that I would be looking for. As currently constructed, no, I don't think they're going to be a playoff, a serious playoff team.
Yeah, I love when you mentioned it. I love the Kobe White. That seems to fit. Like it doesn't accelerate your timeline. It just kind of costs you assets, which you have to spare. And by the way, if you're getting off the Zach Collins contract in the process, that's
Right.
part of the value add there to me.
Yeah.
And I do think that you're onto something in terms of, I think you can look at this roster and wonder because they have Trey Jones, they have Chris Paul, they have Stephon Castle, and just say, well, kind of what is their biggest need? And you look at their starting five, slaughtering opponents. Like they're absolutely just annihilating the competition on the season. I really do think it's someone who you want. It'd be cool to get that live ball creativity and shot making. they desperately need more off-ball gravity around Victor Wembanyama to make his people complain about his paint touches. A lot of it is too, as you've seen what the Spurs spacing can look like on any given possession. And like, I think they're best when you're looking at when they don't have the ball, which they actually have some pretty good on-ball gravity when you look at CP3, Trey Jones, even Steph Castle getting downhill, Wemby, of course.
Yeah.
Their players with the most like off-ball pull are probably Julian Champagnie and Harrison Barnes. That's fine when you're looking at wings in front court. And then there's Devin Vassell, of course, who I think probably does the best job of the team blending both when you want someone who has a ton of on and off ball gravity. Kobe White has a ton of on and off ball gravity. And I would say this, I still believe this might be a good way to get into the discussion of which of these 6 teams that we discussed when you're looking at the Suns, the Lakers, the Clippers, the Kings, the Spurs, and the Golden State Warriors, do you view as most dangerous for this season? I'm still going to lean the Kings. Sabonis quietly having an amazing year, by the way.
Oh, yeah, I don't think it's quiet. I don't think it's quiet.
It's quiet in the sense that I don't think I put him on my all-star team, and I would absolutely remedy that a week later away from them. Building all-star teams are hard, by the way. I didn't dismiss him. I talked about him. Neither here nor there. I think that if the Spurs made a trade like that, or if we could come up with a different name, I honestly haven't you've mentioned Jimmy Butler to them. I think that would be the off-ball gravity. All right, that's a different discussion, but that would be so interesting to me.
Right.
If they made a trade of not insignificance, I'll say, it doesn't need to be a mega trade, but not insignificance, they might have the highest ceiling immediately of this group then. I don't know if I would feel the best about them still.
Like the Kings?
No, the Spurs.
The Spurs. Okay, yeah, I was confused. Yes, all right.
So I feel best about the Kings right now as presently constituted.
Right. Yes.
But if you're telling me like the Spurs made a Kobe White level trade, or maybe even could that person be a little like worse? Is it a Colin Sexton type deal? I might immediately think that the Spurs have the highest ceiling. Again,
right.
The best overall package, maybe not.
Yeah. No, I agree with you on that. That's the thing. And that is why I think we need to preface both this podcast and the one we did about the East with the fact that we're recording this before the trade deadline. Like, if the Spurs did, quote unquote, my trade, and they brought in Kobe as well. Remember, in that part of that package was also Ayo Dosunmu, who I think is flying under the radar, generally speaking.
Yeah, I just don't know what to make of him. He had like some moments last year on offense, but in terms of shooting and just scoring aggression, I worry about him a little bit.
Oh, I think it's Bulls related. I don't think it's him related.
We'll chalk everything up to Bulls. Why isn't Patrick Williams an All NBA player? Bulls.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah, let's get him to San Antonio too. That would be fun to see what happens there. No, but those 2 guys at least would help alleviate some of those spacing concerns a great deal. I agree with you. Like, if you make a not insignificant trade, I think that was the way you phrased it, San Antonio immediately becomes the most interesting part of all or the most interesting team of all these teams listed. What's also something we need to bake into all this is we're only halfway through the season, and as we saw last year, Wemby isn't done developing. Like, he gets better as the season goes on. Like, we also saw that in France before the draft. Like, there's some kind of switch that he just toggles, and then he's like, okay, I've absorbed that. I know what to fix the next time. I still remember from his rookie season, they were playing Chicago. We've been talking about Vooch a lot on this podcast, and Vooch got him for like 2 straight plays. And he was like, oh, yeah, now I know how to handle Wemby, right? And he went right back to it. And the next 4 plays, Wemby was like, nope, I know exactly what you're going to do. And I know what your counter is going to be. And he just locked him the fuck down. And that's the kind of player that he is. He just absorbs ridiculous amounts of information and processes them so quickly that I'm not even ruling out that he could play like an MVP strictly in like the second part of the season. I'm not saying MVP over the full season. I'm saying like play like an MVP candidate in the second half of the year. So these Spurs could be utterly ridiculous by the time April rolls around.
They could, and I do think that there's value. Why? I'm not saying they need to go all in at the trade deadline. Look, they could finish in the top 6 as currently constructed. I don't know that I'd predict it, but like they have that ceiling at least, because just when Wemby's on the court, they would have the equivalent of just like a top 5 net rating in the league. And that's pretty wild. And I know they have a negative net rating on the season, but still, I've become a big believer in that playoff experience is important. And so to get Wemby that taste of playoff basketball as a sophomore, and then it's like, okay, by the time he's in year 3, now he's what, a top 5 player. At that point, he's had playoff experience. Yeah. That's kind of terrifying for the rest of the league. And that's why I would advocate for them making a, like if you could get off of, or maybe, I don't know, like if you could get off of Zach Collins' contract in the process, like would you just take D'Angelo Russell's expiring deal and see if that does anything for you there? Maybe that's not.
I would give Zach Collins away for a multitude of reasons, but there's one reason we haven't talked about that's one of the main reasons why I want him out of there. I want Mamu to take all of his minutes.
Also, the fuckboy haircut. Yeah, that's two top
Mamu
reasons.
is Sandro Mamukelashvili, by the way, just to get his full name out there, is grotesquely underrated. I don't know why the Spurs aren't playing him more. I just don't. And especially his chemistry with Wemby is off the charts. I think there is a player in there that's just waiting to reach a new level. So these Spurs are looking really good. Hell, they might have back-to-back Rookie of the Years as well. Stephon Castle has surprised the heck out of me.
Yeah, I mean, he'll certainly be in the conversation. I just wish you can't trust the offense. I mean, he's got some good control when he has the ball in his hands, and he's
the off-ball shooting is a mess so far. Yeah.
Does Anthony Simons do anything for you with regards to this team?
Oh, I'm basically sending him to OKC because OKC needs a zone buster to play literally perfect basketball, which they would achieve by getting Anthony Simons.
I just don't. Who do you give up as OKC? They just don't have like. If you give up Aaron Wiggins and/or Aaron Joe for that, that's not insignificant on their part.
No. Probably Dort and something.
That's still Dort's like probably on my second team all defense or something like that.
I know, but like you also can make a reasonable argument that even without him, they're still going to be the league's best defense.
All right. Well, yes, they could. Him in the playoffs, like the level of assignments he's able to handle, just a huge.
But see, that's where we differ also because so many people always think defense, where I'm like, okay, but sure, defense, that's great. But if you can't constantly create good looks on the perimeter, if you can't constantly create quality offense, and offensively, I do think it's fair to question whether Lou Dort is as dynamic as someone like Anthony Simons, for example. I think you need to bridge it. I think you need to somehow find a way to align those two. But to answer your question, which was about San Antonio, having a zone breaker like him would not be disinteresting to them, I think, because look, all the weird angles that's going to open up Vic in, hell yes, that's going to be exciting.
And he only has a year left on his contract, so I don't think he would. One, he's not going to like hamstring your books. His money is fine, but he won't hamstring your books. And he fits Wemby's timeline. Like he's not super old. And because there's only a year left, maybe the Blazers just don't move him, but I can't imagine it's going to take a king's ransom to get him. Although they really need his shooting on that team. Would you? I'm going to end with this. We'll actually have 2 quick questions, but I'm going to end with one on the Spurs and ask you a macro question. Would you call Philly about Tyrese Maxey at this point? Just see what's up.
If I'm the Spurs, what am I offering?
Choose.
Whatever. Okay.
They could use a center, so maybe you offer Zach Collins.
The speed, the underrated.
I'm being mostly.
I know you are, but like, no. But like, look, you. I know you are, but at the same time, this is the NBA. People call each other about crazy shit all the time. Like,
would you let them call about LaMelo Ball, or would you throw a tantrum?
Don't put that evil on me, Danforth Valley. Don't. No, I don't. I think the Spurs, and I think Wemby in particular, would be very frustrated 5 games in.
Or he rubs off on LaMelo Ball because he's never been. LaMelo Ball's always been the dude in Charlotte.
He would need consent for that first, Dan.
Okay. Who is, of the 6 that we've talked about? I've already outlaid mine and why. Which team are you highest on this season? This season.
Without changes, right?
Well, if you think like, as an example, if I thought Golden State was going to go out there and be like, just get Jimmy Butler, like, if you really
Right.
think a team is going to make a change, I think it's fair to factor that into your
All right.
selection.
So I will say this. I agree with you on the Kings unless the Warriors goes out and they trade for Vooch. I think Vooch for them is actually a pretty good fit.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's maybe the highest form of praise that Nikola Vucevic has ever received on this podcast.
Yeah, yeah. And look, I'm not necessarily a Vooch lover, but I think in that particular circumstance with Steph and Draymond, I think that's enough to level them up. Yeah.
Mort, you picked the Blazers as the most dangerous sleeper in the Western Conference. I find that bizarre. They weren't even an option, but kudos to you.
Yep.
Are you able to tell our
it.
listeners where they can find you and all the fantastic work you do once more, wrapping up our 4 podcast week together?
Yes. Quite the adventure. Love it. It's always so fun to just sit down and talk NBA with you, Dan. It's one of the things I'm always looking forward to every single month. And sometimes we get 2 episodes in, sometimes it's 3, now it's 4. Let's see, next month it might be 6 or 8. We'll find out. That's gonna be great.
What's the maximum number? We don't record all of these at once. We try to double up, but it's just the time of year where if we tried to record evergreen content, I don't think anything exists like that at this time of year.
No. But look, if people enjoy what they're listening to, you know what, then so be it. It's fine, whether it's evergreen or not. Sometimes people just want to listen to the personalities instead and like have a good time. And that's what I always hope to achieve. But we'll see. You can find my work though on Yahoo, at Forbes, at Sports Illustrated, specifically Draft Digest. And then I also do a bunch of Danish stuff. And I look, good on you if you go into Duolingo and it's like, yeah, I want to read more Danish shit. So let me just like try to learn Danish. If you do that, I'm going to send you the biggest thumbs up ever.
I props to anyone who's bilingual, trilingual, multilingual in general. I have very little background in Italian, and that's just it. I'm going to need you to start teaching me some Danish words. That's what we should do when we talk before and after each podcast. Like, it should be like a lesson in speaking your lingo.
Right, just a single word. Okay, I'll need some prep just to find like the right words. So like from next month, when apparently we'll be recording like 16 episodes or something along those lines, I'll have a word every single time. Yeah.
Yes, that'll be fun. Listeners can learn along with me. Shout out to everyone listening. Shout out to Mort. And as always, shout out to the one, the only, the real missing piece, not just for San Antonio, but for every other team, not on just this podcast, but the rest of the NBA, Mr. Frank Ntilikina.